Happy to bring this next guest on. I had him on the Sports Intel last year, and he was great. He kicked off the season for us, and now we have him back. And Brock, we were talking about this with the previous guest, how people are kind of talking about, oh, well, they don't have the powerhouses anymore in the NFL, but it's more that they've changed. And I think you're seeing it more than anybody because the NFC West is stacked, but we're not talking about it here as much in the Midwest. The Seahawks are quietly very good, and the Rams with the former Lions quarterback, they're playing great. And so I'm excited to get you on and get your takes on the Rams side of things before the big matchup here.
Yeah, no, it's going to be a great matchup. And you're so right. Unfortunately, I think we can also see this in the collegiate world. Branding has so much of an influence in terms of narratives when it comes to these big powerhouses. But as you said, the Rams, of course, are at the top of Matthew Stafford. Seattle is right there with one of the top defenses in the NFL, along with one of the premier offensive threats in Jackson Smith and Jigba. You also see the Packers are building something very special in Green Bay. There could possibly be something happening in Chicago, Detroit. Of course, not a great year, but the framework is there. So the NFC, to me, the power structure has switched. Of course, AFC used to have it because of the Chiefs and Patriots and so on. But now this is the NFC's moment, and you see these guys start to rise to the top.
Well, you mentioned the Chiefs and the Patriots. Who knew that it was going to be the latter that was going to be the strongest team this year? The Chiefs are one of those perennial powers that's struggling a little bit more than we thought they might. And then the Patriots are surging with Vrabel there and having the new young quarterback. So, but I just marvel at the Rams. Obviously, a lot of people are going to be interested in the storyline of Stafford versus his former team. It's happened several times, but I think it's still an interesting narrative because it's like a snowflake each time. It's an individual experience where I thought he left with a lot of grace when he left Detroit, and then I know he's been a little irritated with some of the responses, but he's LA's quarterback now, and I mean, this is a guy. I'm curious about your take on Stafford, Shayne, because obviously you played in the league at the same time as him, and I mean, it takes a certain amount of durability and probably some breaks to a degree to really hang around and be this elite for this long, because this is a guy that I didn't think his back was going to hold. When he was in Detroit, he really had some issues with injuries, then went over to LA. He's battled those, but he's I don't know if it's an improved off-season routine or what he's doing, but he's really had a great amount of durability over there with the Rams.
Well, I think one thing we're learning is that he's always been really tough. Like we've all kind of seen how tough he can be as a player. But these quarterbacks make so much money. The advantages that you can have with an unlimited budget when it comes to physical treatments and the nutrition and the science that you can find to kind of keep your body fine-tuned. We always had coaches that told us our bodies were our race cars, and how we treated our body is how we took care of our race cars to make it ready for race day. He is an F1, probably the highest grade F1, type of guy, and I'm sure he's getting it taken care of in the best way possible. But also, there's a lot of that is mental. And it's how do you he's always shown that he's been tough in certain situations, and I think that when you have someone who has a mindset that can stay through things and get through a little bit of pain and get through a little bit of injury and go through the treatment and do all the things it takes to make yourself ready. Some guys are above average pros, and a pro is someone that does anything and everything when they feel like it and when they don't feel like it. And when you're a guy like that, I think that kind of gives him kind of that competitive edge. I mean, we saw it with Tom Brady. You see it with some guys. I don't know for a fact that this is kind of how he is. I'm just assuming. But I think that mindset probably is something that kind of gives him a little bit more of that sustainability.
I think it's a great point, and we saw the development of that here in Michigan, and now he's continued because he's getting to the point where he's played over there with the Rams for a long time now, Brock. And when he left Detroit, there was a premature discussion, radio style discussion, basically saying, "Hey, well, is he a Hall of Famer?" Because we always like to jump to those things too early, and well, he didn't have a lot of the accolades that he needed. Now, at his advanced age, he's having an MVP caliber season and has clearly put together the resume. That's neither here nor there. But it's amazing to me that this is the season that he's now in the top ranks of the MVP discussion here.
Yes, and I think the general consensus for all of us entering this year was that Stafford either needed one MVP-type season or two really good seasons to solidify his candidacy for the Hall of Fame. There's actually one stat that came out, and it's in NFL history. There's been certain occasions in which a quarterback has thrown for at least 3 touchdowns and recorded 0 interceptions in at least 7 games. And I believe it's happened 5 times, and 4 out of those 5 times, the player won the MVP. When you are able to play at that high of a level to the points being made, it's something inside. You could give me 10 times the resources Matthew Stafford has, and I would give you 1/100th of the production. There's just something about the way he commands the room, the respect that he has in the locker room, the relationship that he has with the Rams coaches. Not a lot of people in general can have the confidence, ability to go out there, say what they want to say, and then go out and execute. And that's what really separates himself, Stafford, from everybody else. I'm sure you guys saw it at Michigan for all those wonderful years that you guys had him. I think the two different. Oh, sorry, continue.
No, go ahead, Brock.
I think the true difference for him this year is that he's had the one element that he hasn't had with the Rams yet, that he did have with Detroit, and that is that athletic, big-bodied wide receiver who he can throw a 50-50 ball to at any point and know that at the very worst, it's going to be an incompletion. At the very best, it's going to put up points, and that's Davante Adams. Since losing a guy like Calvin Johnson, yes, the production has been great, but there's been a lack of that final surgical throw. And we have seen it before at Cooper Kupp. But when he has the ability at this age to have a much bigger target, the production speaks for itself.
It does. And I'm marveling at what he's been able to do, but also not that surprised to a degree. But I'm curious how you see this game kind of playing out here, because the Rams are rolling. They had kind of the one anomaly against the Panthers. The main thing that I guess surprises me, in addition to the Stafford piece, is I remember a couple years ago they seemed to be spending in a way that it was kind of going to be a zero-sum game for them, where they were going to spend themselves out of the future and they were playing for the present. But now, lo and behold, they've got one of the younger teams in the league actually now, and they've got that young defensive front. They've got a lot of young pieces in there, and even though they have an aging quarterback, he's aging like fine wine, essentially, as Shayne was talking about, and now you've got those young guys there with them. It seems to be elements coming together where this team could make its mark in a somewhat wide open NFC right now.
Yes, and that plays into Stafford's production, right? There's that youthful vigor in him because he's surrounded by so many young guys who are able to go out and do spectacular things. Certain of these elements he may have not had in previous years. No offense to Cooper Kupp, but it was clear that his age had caught up with him after a while. For that Rams roster, I want to go to that. I'm glad you brought that up. There was the era of blank them picks, of course, where they were spending crazy, go out and get Stafford and Jalen Ramsey, and also a part of that was all the capital they traded in order to go and select Jared Goff back in 2016 before Sean McVay even came into the picture. After that, the organization had to ask themselves some very tough questions after the 2022 season. And for Sean McVay himself, he had to ask some tough questions about how he approaches things, his personality, how he views things. That offseason, they went on an entire revamp. It was Les Snead, Sean McVay, the brain trust within the Rams, which also includes Jacksonville Jaguars general manager James Gladstone. And they said, hey, let's start from scratch and let's build our team with the characteristics of the players that we want. And that's what they've done this whole time. And that's why they've been able to hit on all of these draft picks. Because regardless of what you see on film with a guy like Puka Nacua, he is the quintessential Ram in terms of his character, his behavior, and just his attitude. Say the same things about guys like Cameron Kitchens, or a player like Jared Verse, or even a player like Braden Fisk. And because of that, that's how they were able to bring in so many guys and kind of raise them in this Rams system. And that's why they're such an effective unit. When it comes to the Detroit Lions, I mean, you guys are essentially Rams 2.0, and the Jaguars are Rams 3.0 in terms of having Brad Holmes as that, the builder of the team. Some of the same things, right? Dan Campbell's not going to bring in a guy that doesn't match a Dan Campbell attitude. And that's why when it comes to this game, I'm seeing this as a I can't even speak anymore. One of those contests where they're going to take on the personalities of the head coaches, and that's why I think it's going to be such a great matchup.
Yeah, I'm hoping so. It's a big game for both teams, and it's a marquee matchup. But it really feels like the Lions kind of have more on the line, but both sides, like you said, there's so many connections between these two teams. Not only did they trade quarterbacks, and those quarterbacks still remain in those positions and are two of the most prominent quarterbacks and have become intricate parts of their franchises now. We're kind of, I think Goff just crossed over to playing more games with the Lions than he played with the Rams. Stafford obviously had more games under his belt, but he's played a lot of games with the Rams now. And so it's going to be an interesting game, but I'm curious what you see as kind of the keys to the game, because obviously we talked about some of the matchups and the teams kind of being built in similar images, but what are the individual matchups and maybe the units that you're watching that you think might kind of determine the game here?
So actually, I think when it comes to this matchup, the Lions have the advantage. The Rams are taking this game as serious as possible because there's so much that can go right or wrong for them, especially since they have a game the following Thursday against Seattle, which could determine the division based off what happens in this Lions game. However, the Lions have two elements on their offense that I think I know the Rams have struggled to handle defensively this season. The short, quick passing game with receivers who can add yards after catch, and then also a rushing attack that is able to rotate running backs. The first part, I'm going to reference the Week 5 loss for the Rams against the San Francisco 49ers. In that game, I was sitting in the press box, I was enjoying my chicken wings, and I could not stop marveling at the fact that somehow Jerry Rice came back from retirement to suit up for the 49ers again. Turns out that was actually Kendrick Bourne, but the way the Rams' defensive structure was, Bourne was able to catch passes instantly from Mac Jones, that allowed the 49ers to not allow Jones to get sacked, and Bourne was able to take the ball all the way upfield repeatedly. Of course, with the Lions having multiple players who can do that, there is that risk. And then with the Carolina Panthers, when the Rams played them, Rico Dwaddle, I apologize for mispronouncing his name, and Chuba Hubbard went off against the Rams. And of course, when you have a running back duo like David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs, plus an offensive line and the identity, though the line itself may not be what it was last year, there's still some big, tough boys up front. If the Rams are unable to handle that, they won't win the game. There's no chance they can win. On top of that, how the Rams approach, can Dan Campbell call the right counter at the right time in order to put his team in an advantageous position? On the flip end, it's going to be how the Detroit defense manages the multiple personnel packages the Rams like to use during the game. Before this year, McVay was very clear. He likes 11 personnel. He likes 3 wide receivers on the field, 1 tight end, 1 running back. Now, because of so many issues of the roster in terms of injuries and roster movements, so on and so forth, he's instituted 13 personnel, 12 personnel, more tight end sets. How does Detroit match up against them, especially with a player like Brian Branch being out? That is going to be the other difference for this game.
Yeah, there's a lot of moving pieces, like you said, and especially with the injuries. That's been and that's part of the NFL. That's part of adjusting to. So I have 53 men on the team and all of that. But adjusting to the life without Brian Branch will be a new one for the Lions for this game, and they've tried to make some acquisitions, but it'll likely be the internal matchups here. But I loved the breakdown. Give me what you think on the score here on the way out, and we'll have Brock on next week to review the game with us, and then make sure to tell the people where they can follow you for the Rams side of the coverage in between here.
Of course, I'm going to have to say the Rams win this one. I'm sure many of your viewers are going to disagree with me on that one. I have this finishing a 24-21 ball game where the Rams are able to kick a field goal late in the game to put this one on ice.
I always encourage the writers to choose their team. They often choose the Lions. I think it's posturing here on Michigan radio, but yeah, I can't blame you for that choice. But appreciate you being on the show, and make sure to tell people where they can follow your coverage, because it's great coverage of the Rams here.
Thank you, and you can follow me on Twitter at Brock Vierra. Follow me for all your favorite updates about the Rams, and also, of course, Matthew Stafford. And you can check out all my work at www.si.com/NFL/Rams/on-SI, or to make it easy, Los Angeles Rams on SI.
Be sure to check him out. It's great coverage. I've been following him since we had him on the show last year, and should be an exciting game. We'll have him on to review after the game here, and appreciate you coming on, Brock.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, thanks. We'll talk to you next week.